If you've liked the things that you've seen on the Get to Know OCD podcast and you want to know more about OCD, you can go to NOCD.com. We have tons of education. You can go to our NOCD YouTube channel and watch our webinars and other episodes of the podcast. And we hope that you will take advantage of everything that we have available to you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. My name is Dr. Patrick McGrath. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for NOCD. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we have expertly trained clinicians waiting to work with you. And our care team is ready to take your call. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, you can subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel or get it wherever you get your favorite podcasts at. I'm really excited to finally, in virtual person, I suppose, talk to Jan Stewart, because we have been in the same circles for a long time, but have just never had the chance to finally get together like this. So this is really exciting for me because I know your name, you know my name, we know each other, and we know people who know each other and everything. So thank you, Jan, for coming on and finally for us having the opportunity to chat with each other.
Well, wonderful to be here, Patrick. Thank you.
And you've got a book out called Hold On Tight. It is a parent's journey through raising children who have mental health conditions. And that's really what we wanted to discuss today. And I'm excited to do it. And I know that we're going to talk about OCD, but there's more than just OCD. So for anyone watching this, I think that this will be really interesting to you because we're going to get a little broader today than we might normally do. Because, of course, OCD doesn't just come in a finely little tightly knit, bowed up package. It likes to bring friends sometimes. And you've seen that in your family. And so I'm wondering if you could start us off with the inspiration to write the book, your history a little bit, and where things are today. And then we'll kind of open it up for some Q&A between each other.
Absolutely. Be delighted to. So, let me start with some background and tell you that I'm originally from New York City. And I grew up in a wonderful family that was very achievement-oriented. So I graduated from Northwestern University right outside your town of Chicago.
There we go.
I have an MBA in finance and accounting from Columbia. I worked in corporate and investment banking for 10 years and then spent the bulk of my career with the global executive search firm Aegon Zender, a Swiss-based company, where I rose to become managing partner of the Toronto office and was a member of the global executive committee. So followed my parents' expectations of success and hard work and all that.
I was going to say, sounds like a family disappointment to me, Jan, but okay.
But in my personal life, I was immediately smitten when I met my Canadian husband, David. And he, like I, neither of us had really known true adversity in our lives before. We really had on those rose-colored glasses about what the future would bring and assumed naively that our kids would just follow in the same path we had. There was no question about it. I remember looking back, having long, serious discussions with him about whether we should educate the children when I was pregnant in French or English, because Canada is a bilingual country, whether we should start saving for private school. And I look back at those discussions and they were frankly ludicrous because the cracks began to show almost immediately after both children were born. Mm-hmm. And finding out we didn't have one, but we had two children with multiple complex mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders came as quite a shock. Mm-hmm. I really had heard the words autism, OCD, Tourette syndrome, but I really didn't know what they were other than the stereotyped, sensationalized things that we all have heard. Yeah. So it's been a really harrowing journey, to be frank, with heartbreaking adversity at times. But it's a journey that's never ending on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's a breathtaking, wonderful journey in many ways. I don't agree with many people on social media with toxic positivity that you wouldn't change a thing, that everything is great and we are who we are. They're heartbreaking challenges, as I said. We've had to work hard to navigate our overly complex healthcare system.
Sure.
I had to work hard to find schools that were willing to look at both children in a holistic manner and partner with us. And then later, because they're grown up now, to find employers who are really inclusive and understanding. We faced new challenges, as I'm sure you know, Patrick, at every stage, from complications with co-occurring conditions to, I would say, OCD rearing its ugly head from time to time, still today, in many different forms, whether it's the classic textbook OCD, just right OCD, or body-focused repetitive behaviors. In Andrew's case, lip picking and scap picking. Mm-hmm. We've had to accept the fact, frankly, that our lives would not be as planned for or hoped for in many ways in order to move forward. And that has included recalibrating support and what we can expect to receive from family members and friends in the face of fear, misunderstandings, and stigma. Yeah. Yet with all these challenges, my kids, they never give up. They know their lives are going to be endless roller coasters, but they've grown into responsible, caring young adults who give back to their communities and face life head on with optimism, joy, and determination. Because of them, I am an ambassador of hope and perseverance. They're really my heroes. And that's why I wrote the book. Mm-hmm. You know, my kids' stories propelled me years and years ago into advocacy. And this is where you and I began to circle each other, Patrick.
Sure. Yeah.
I've sat on many different boards and advisory councils in both Canada and the United States. And that includes becoming vice chair of Canada's leading psychiatric hospital, CAMH, of sitting on the Parent Advisory Council at Massachusetts General Hospital's Department of Neuropsychopharmacology with Joe Biederman. I currently chair Carey's Place, which is Canada's largest autism services provider. But in OCD specifically, I sat on the original Ontario chapter board in my province. And during that time, Andrew was about 10 or 11. He's my child with OCD. Ainsley has many other related disorders and conditions, but he's the one with OCD. And our family participated in a documentary called OCD, The War Inside. It won every award going. It's still on YouTube today. And Andrew gets thank you notes from people around the world. He just got one yesterday. Wonderful. People thanking him for having watched the story. Just like you, I've been to IOCDF conferences, presented. I write for the newsletter. In fact, in the last issue, I published an article on hospitalization and residential treatment for OCD. And I'm now doing two exciting things in Canada with OCD. I'm on the IOCDF Canada Task Force, working to increase resources and collaboration in Canada. And I'm working with psychologists in Montreal, who I'm sure you know, Dr. Debbie Suchman, on an exciting project targeted at improving outcomes for those with lived experience as well as those with loved ones. So all these activities have led many struggling parents and caregivers to reach out for help over the years. And I vividly remember being in their shoes, frightened, frozen, feeling isolated, not knowing what to do, how to do it, and terrified about the future. And that's why I wrote Hold On Tight. I want readers to understand, I'm brutally honest, the unsugar-coated reality of OCD and related conditions and disorders, but I equally celebrate successes and share, I think there are about 13 key insights to help ease the journey. Mm-hmm. This is a book I wish I had as a young parent. So that's the background for you.
I remember interviewing Chris Tronson and then his mother as well, too. And she was similar, talking about, there's some stuff that I did that I look back going, that might not have been the best thing to do. And I love that honesty, right? And I appreciate that. I've told similar stories when my wife was dying. There are days that I wasn't great. I could have been better at times. And so we all have days that we don't do the best, right? And so thank you for sharing that part of it, because I've seen so much guilt in families of people who have OCD who worry, did I give this to my child? Is this my fault? How did you go through all of that and come out on the other side in the very positive view that you're showing today? Because I'm going to bet it wasn't always that way.
No, and I would extend even what you said, Patrick.
Sure.
It's not that we all have bad days. Everyone has bad days. But I think it's okay. And you should expect to have those days. I can't tell you how many days I've wanted to run away and hide, or I've looked at myself in the mirror and said, why me? Why us? Mm-hmm. It just happens. Mm-hmm. But that key, as I said a few minutes ago, is accept the fact that your life may not be as planned for or hoped for in many ways, and then you can move forward. You don't have to embrace it, but accept it. And life will become very meaningful and purposeful as a result. Now, how have I been able to go on? Let me give you a little more background first, because I think that'll help.
Perfect.
There were, as I said, perplexing signs and symptoms from almost the beginning. Even as a baby, Andrew's hands and feet moved constantly. He never talked to himself, gurgled in his crib, and he had no internal controls when it came to feeding. Mm-hmm. And as he grew into a toddler and started school, couldn't maintain eye contact, had meltdowns anytime there was change or transition between activities, became very literal, no abstract thinking. But every time I approached our doctor, he told me essentially that I was the problem. Overly vigilant, hyperachievement oriented, triple type A. Just relax, your kids will be fine.
The sad, it's always the mother's fault is what you're saying. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and he was well-meaning. Mm-hmm. But I did learn to trust my gut, and I refused to settle and kept looking. And we were oddly fortunate when Andrew turned 9, because on the one hand, out of the blue, suddenly one day, he erupted into a 2-hour violent, frightening meltdown, kicking, screaming, ranting, raving, punching holes in walls. And within 1 month, nonstop OCD rituals started. And they kept escalating and changing, as you know. He would sweep the floor constantly, tap shoulders, touch walls. Outside, he would rub his head against car tires and poles. He would get down on the filthy subway floor and try to gnaw it. He hoarded glass shards and brought them home, and it goes on and on. But we were oddly fortunate because finally his behavior and symptomology were so clear that he was fully diagnosed. Okay. So in addition to OCD, Tourette syndrome, autism, ADHD, anxiety, learning disabilities, and developmental disabilities. Now, unlike other parents who understandably need time to process and absorb the diagnosis and go into shock, for me, they were such a relief. They were a validation of my concerns. They propelled me forward. They allowed me to start advocating for him and getting the right help, going down that path for him. So whether it was healthcare, where we embraced medications and ERP therapy very quickly, and both from the beginning and throughout the rest of his life will be life-saving for him. Schools and now work, those diagnoses allowed him to get the accommodations and support that he needs. Sure. And having that, quote, label of OCD and related disorders didn't scare me. In fact, it pointed me toward parent support groups. And at the time, this is many years ago, there were no parent support groups in Toronto for OCD. David and I were attending parent support groups for autism, ADHD, and Tourette syndrome. So I approached endocrinologists and we created one. And it was very important for me to meet other parents and caregivers in the same boat. So I think I've been able to go on partly because I'm wired that way, but also, and I'm solutions oriented in everything I do, but also because I learned those key life lessons early of trusting my gut, of resetting the expectations for my life, chatted a little bit about. I learned the hard way, the importance of taking care of myself, forgiving myself for my mistakes, and also, as Andrew learned in ERP, to face my fears. And that meant to start preparing for the future. Yeah.
Sounds like a full-time job just to be an advocate in many ways, doesn't it? Right? Yeah. So Jan, you're an advocate, you're a wife, you're a mother, and you have to take care of yourself. It sounds like you didn't sleep for 7 years. Am I correct? Or how do you do all of those things and also do what I always talk about is sometimes I at first I felt it was selfish. Like when Susan was sick, I used to think, oh, doing something for me is selfish. And then I learned it was essential that I had to take care of myself too. How did you balance all of those things? What did you learn along the way about that?
Well, balance may not be the right word, but I learned some of this the hard way because I am convinced that the stress and strain that we all face as caregivers, but can be absolutely debilitating and overwhelming. I love the quote that the psychologist Alec Pollard, who I know you know,
I've heard
writes
of him. Yeah.
when he says to caregivers, I may not have OCD myself, but I nonetheless suffer from it.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that. So I think those stresses and strains led to a number of illnesses that I had, culminating years ago in fairly advanced breast cancer. And I had 4 operations, chemotherapy, radiation during the midst of all this. But it was a blessing in a way because it was a wake-up call. And I started understanding the importance of taking care of myself. This goes way beyond healthy eating, which I try to do. It's not natural for me, but I try. I love ice cream. It goes beyond trying to sleep well, not always easy, and exercising, which I stopped for a long time. I've always been very fit, but there was time where you're just trying to get through the day minute by minute, much less being able to do anything else. I couldn't invest in my friendships. I couldn't do anything. I was consumed with taking care of the kids. But once I woke up and realized that, I learned some key lessons about self-care. Beyond those 3, one is reach out for the support that I need, that you need. And it doesn't matter whether it's to professionals or you've heard me say we attended multiple parent support groups. To me, finding parents of similar kids has been my lifeline.
Okay.
Absolutely key. Don't forget the importance of humor. Totally. Humor is absolutely key. And there are many funny stories with the kids that we do and laugh at ourselves about. I think also you must carve out part of your life away from your children and away from your partner so that you don't burn out. I had this high-pressure career. You've heard me talk about it. It was a lifesaver for me. It separated me from the issues at home. It helped me rebuild my own identity, and it frankly made me a better parent as a result. I also love, and I've gone back to the gym. I work out 5-6 times a week. I swim, but the treadmill in particular lets me think through my issues and regain perspective. And when my kids are in crisis, I know I must take even 10 minutes for myself, a short walk, or I love bubble baths. But all these things help us refuel. And as part of that, it's forgiving myself for my mistakes and being kind to myself. When Andrew had one of those horrific, violent meltdowns, I found Ainsley shaking in fear, hiding in her closet. And it took me a long time to forgive myself because I should have protected her better. But I also pat myself on the back. We all must do this and compliment ourselves for our strength and resilience.
Not easy to do, obviously, and takes practice, right? To be able to do something of that nature. Wasn't just one child, right? So you have 2 children and they don't even necessarily share the same conditions across the way. You've got to learn a lot about a lot of things. How do you hold all of this and make sure that both of the children are getting the things that they need, and maybe come away from that with this idea that I'm providing as much as possible equal attention and care to them, so that inevitably one might feel like they got more attention than I did or something of that nature. But I'm sure it was a real effort on your part to assure that you're giving the attention to both children and the things that they need in as much of an equal way as possible.
As much as you can. Yeah. Obviously, when one child is in crisis, you have to turn to that child more and then the other. But I think the key to this is to be very open and as honest and transparent as you can with all your children. All of our kids are frightened when they don't know what's going on and when they don't fully understand. You've got to listen and explain and let them know they're valued. We separated them from their issues so that their identities weren't tied to them. We made sure they knew they weren't bad children. Ainsley apologized to me one day and wrote me a note and said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm a bad child, but I can't help my out-of-control behavior." And my heart broke.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew told me he wanted to die, and my heart broke. So you must sit down with them and do that. Part of that is also educating them as well as yourself about each disorder, about each condition, not hiding or avoiding information, not calling medications anything but medications, and getting them to participate increasingly. What side effects are you feeling? How are you doing? What's working? What isn't? And today, my kids, even with all their challenges, advocate for themselves, and it's wonderful. It's really breathtaking to see. But that finding Ainsley in that closet was a wake-up call when we were paying a little more attention to Andrew than to Ainsley. And intellectually, I think every parent knows every child is just as needy.
Sure.
So we're lucky we only have two. And we spent whatever time we could, precious little as it was, with Ainsley, doing activities that she enjoyed. Must be activities that she enjoyed. She was a real tomboy, so it was playing soccer and ice hockey. We sent her to sibling support groups for OCD and other things. And she had her own support groups. There was an urban farm in Toronto at the time that had a wonderful program for siblings in distress and trauma.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
No longer exists, sadly. But most importantly, we sat down with her and in language that she could understand, explained what was going on with her brother so that it became less frightening and we demystified it. And it's worked. They're each other's best friends.
That's awesome. It's easy for people to identify as their conditions. How did you help your kids move into developing those identities that they have now and not just be a label of what they're diagnosed with?
Well, I think part of that, as I said, gets back to being very open and transparent. Mm-hmm. When you do that, they understand holistically that they're much more than their OCD, Tourette, autism, ADHD, whatever it is. But we don't minimize those challenges. Ainsley, to this day, her ADHD and executive function deficits are so extensive that she really has trouble executing, picking up meds that she's running out of, making an important appointment, whatever it is, tidying up, doing her laundry. So each child has different challenges, but we talk about them. They see that, but we also, David and I were very clear from the beginning, and I think 90% of it has been very positive, that they would never be limited by their challenges and their disabilities. And they internalized that and believed it. There are a few times when it's led to unrealistic expectations where, again, it's been hard for me to forgive myself for having given them this. Andrew, after high school, decided he wanted to attend MIT for whatever reason. Andrew can't attend any university ever. And he resented me, and he was right.
Yeah.
But I think just reaffirming, listening carefully, validating their concerns, letting them know they're valued and understood builds their self-esteem. And from that, they've just blossomed.
So I like where you said earlier this idea that you had to kind of trust your gut. And one of the things we talk about, and I'll go to OCD specifically here, is interview that therapist. Fred Penzel's article on the IOCDF is so good in this area, but to make sure that you are meeting with someone who you feel really knows what they're talking about.
Correct.
And I'm going to assume you met a lot of people who you felt maybe you knew more than they did in this scenario. How do you work with people respectfully, kindly, but advocate and trust that gut and say, you know what, we're going to find a specialist in that area and not just trust what the first person is telling you?
Right. And it took me a long time to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Andrew was 9 and those meltdowns and rituals just erupted suddenly that I finally insisted on looking elsewhere. I had been brought up, like you probably, that our doctor was the medical expert and he knew it and we should trust him. But I did learn that lesson and refused to settle, as I said. I think there are a few key things that I look for. One is to embrace research. You must do your research. And in OCD, let's talk about that. In my family, if we don't hear the words exposure and response prevention, if we don't hear someone who can explain it, if it's a general therapist who says, oh yeah, I know what ERP is, and they really don't, go elsewhere.
There you go.
Not easy to do. There's a shortage. We know that, but you must do that. And I do this to this day in everything that I do. That research is key. Secondly, I think the most overarching insight in my book, Hold On Tight, is the word partnership. Insist on an integrated partnership approach with everyone involved in your child's care. So, I said it a little earlier. If there's a therapist or a psychiatrist who doesn't want to willingly collaborate with me, treat me with dignity and respect, as an equal, I go elsewhere.
Yeah.
I remember early on, before I really knew all this, Andrew had aged out of his developmental pediatrician.
Okay.
And it was time to move on. And I had heard about a highly regarded, this is a family doctor, a general doctor, so not mental health. And he and I went to interview them. So interviewing and meeting with them first is key. And this doctor was trying to establish rapport with Andrew. So he turned to Andrew and said, tell me about your mom. I'm sitting right there. And Andrew said, oh, my mom is very important. And this doctor, I don't know what he was thinking, said, oh, she's a grand fromage. And Andrew says, what does that mean? He said, oh, in French, it means big cheese. And Andrew said, but I don't like cheese. I said, thank you, Dr. So-and-so. And we got up and left. So even at that basic level, it's trusting that gut, but it's doing systematic research. It's other parents and caregivers are wonderful referral sources. The IOCDF is a wonderful referral source, but everyone is different. And what works for one may not work for another.
Yeah. I like that. The big cheese. Yeah. Because you probably knew at that point, Andrew had just made an association then with, oh, well, that's not going to work out, is it? Right.
No.
Yeah. I see you have the book behind you. I'm wondering, is there a passage that you would want to read to us and maybe just share a little bit that if there's a favorite that you have, I'd love to just kind of hear and then chat about it a little bit. If
Sure,
you
be happy to.
Okay.
Let me just find it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know which one I always like. There we go.
All right.
So if I say, okay, this is toward the end of the book.
Okay.
Our family has been on a non-stop roller coaster ride since the children were born. The journey has been exhausting, disheartening, frustrating, and terrifying. It has equally been inspirational, educational, and eye-opening. There have been times when I have quietly asked myself, why me, why us, and have become numb and despondent about my own future. I am not a religious person, but I've gone to church to pray. There was even a period when I didn't care if I died, as I saw no happiness ahead. I ignored my health, didn't bother taking needed medications, or seek treatment. David has also been discouraged at times. And I still have days when I am so exhausted, so drained of energy, that all I want to do is curl up in a hole and disappear. In the worst of times, I feel as if someone has punched me in the stomach. And just as I'm about to get up, another swing comes at me hard. In better times, my life is a constant vigil in which I'm always on guard, holding my breath and trying not to wait for the next crisis. I've learned to try to enjoy the good times, knowing that they won't last, and to equally remind myself during the bad times that they too will lift. I have great hopes and wishes for my children's futures. Of course, I want them to be happy and stable. I want them to know that their perseverance and will to succeed will help them climb out of every crisis they face. I want them to be productive citizens who enjoy their jobs, give back to their communities, and engage in activities that give them joy. whether watching the Toronto Blue Jays play, hapless, or taking Ainsley's dog, Emmy May, for a long walk. I want them to remember they're surrounded by people who love and support them, and I want them to understand how special they are, and that they both make a difference in the lives of every person they touch.
Lovely. I love it. When you look at that and what you've been through and what you've learned, and I understand you're in Canada, so you can really speak to the Canadian health system more so, but you've had enough interactions, obviously, in the U.S. and around the world. What are things that you think we need to think about in terms of our healthcare system broadly, universally, that we could do to make it better for people? Not right.
Oh, it's a great question, Patrick. And Peter Satmari, who's a Canadian psychiatrist who's very well known, wrote the foreword to my book. And in it, he makes the point that the mental health system, whether it's in Canada or the U.S., by the way, isn't a rational system. Mm-hmm. Through the years, I've had to cobble together, and you've heard this, the services and supports for my kids, and it hasn't been easy. Mm-hmm. The current system is often geared to service the provider, not the family. And we know that the patient is, in fact, the whole family. Remembering what Alec Pollard says, I may not have OCD myself, but I suffer from it nonetheless. So a rational mental health, caring mental health system would be one, I think, in which there are sufficient resources, easy to access clinical services, shorter wait times, prevention programs for those at high risk, and a broad mental health education program that really fights the stigma, fear, and misunderstandings that come from a lack of awareness and a lack of education. At its core, it's got to be a family-centered approach. I think that's absolutely key, but there's so much that we in society can do because, as you know, there's a tendency in society to treat people who are different as inferior, as something's wrong, or sometimes even dangerous. And the media is at fault for some of that. But mental illness is elusive. We have to know, it varies from person to person. It can't be measured the way many physical disorders can. And that lack of understanding can lead to fear. That lack of awareness can cause stereotypes and inaccurate ones. I've talked to many parents who tell me their families and friends don't understand, don't want to get involved, or scared of the challenges. We'll tell them and I've had this happen, if you were just stricter, your kids' problems would disappear. They're just attention seeking. They're obstinate, right? It's that fear of the unknown that's such a powerful contributor. So we've got to increase social connectivity. That connectivity is so key in fighting loneliness and isolation and building belonging, feelings of belonging and self-worth. We need to shout out about the facts, as I said, to fight that stigma, because if we don't talk about OCD, it remains hidden, and that's when misunderstandings grow. There's no question about it. Healthcare professionals need greater training and specific, qualified, evidence-based training. Schools need better resources, particularly for early intervention. Employers need to be held responsible for giving employees better opportunities and understanding the benefits they bring and creating a real environment of belonging. And universities, of course, hopefully need to train more psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, not only to deepen the pool, but to facilitate access, shorten wait times, and make the system less complex to navigate. So much of it is about, again, that word partnership and inclusivity, where we treat every individual with respect and care for each other as we care for our own.
I love something you said there, and I'll make a little joke here to preface this, but Jan, did you ever just think of telling your children, stop it? Right?
You know how many times, Patrick, do you know how many times, especially when I was learning not to enable Andrew's OCD, there were times, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, I actually said to him once, Andrew, can't you be like Nike? Stop, just do it.
Yeah.
And I looked back at it in horror. And of course, I accommodated his OCD great many times before I learned that all that does is fuel it.
Yeah. I say that just because you're so right, where there is still this weird acceptance that if your children had brain tumors, oh, Jan, this is so terrible. Oh my gosh, how awful. But if they have mental health problems, well, why don't you just tell them to stop it and then they'll be fine? It just, and so I think that your reading just gets to the heart of what it's like to be a parent, and you help broaden that message that this isn't just that children have a physical issue. The parents of children who have mental health issues have the exact same experiences and more, right? Because almost no one would blame the parent for the physical health issue, but there's still today this idea that, well, if your kid has that, I mean, how did you screw them up? I mean, what did you really kind of do, right?
I do want to balance that a little bit, though, Patrick. I remember being at the IOCDF conference last year in Florida, and I was listening to a panel of highly regarded psychiatrists who were talking to parents and caregivers of kids with OCD. And one of them said, look, if you don't like your psychiatrist and they're not treating you with respect, just go elsewhere. And there was just dead silence in the room because that psychiatrist didn't understand it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. No.
Right.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm happy that we're attacking stigma as much as we possibly can, and what we do. And it's one of the reasons I do this podcast, is to help to absolutely do that and to bring the messages like you have out to more and more people. Anything I can do to help support what you do, I want to do, because I love the work that you do and
vice versa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope one day everybody, no matter what anyone has as a condition, anybody would just have an empathy for that and be able to go, wow, that really stinks. What can I do to help? Versus a judgment on that experience, right?
I often am asked by family members and friends, what can we do to help a family who's going through this? And I have a really simple answer. Just ask us.
Yeah.
Sometimes all we need is a listening ear. Sometimes it's someone who lets us weep.
Yep.
I love a long bear hug. And sometimes who just laughs with us about everyday activities. It's not someone who's critical, judgmental,
right,
or who offers unasked for advice, which is usually wrong anyway. It's someone who shows you not only with their words, but with their heart and their actions that they're there for you.
Well, you're going to get a big old bear hug from this guy in Chicago. Let me tell you that. That's going to. The other piece that I think is important, and what I would like parents to hear from you, where you said OCD is so conniving that it gets you to be involved in it without you even knowing that you're doing it. And then there comes a point when you've finally engaged with therapy and you know what you're doing now, and you have to pull away from providing those safety behaviors to your children. Could you speak to the parents listening here who are on the fence about, but my child is suffering so much already, and now you want me to pull back from the things that I'm doing? Aren't they going to just suffer more? That sounds so cruel and terrible. How do you address that experience?
It does sound cruel and terrible. And you know what? In the short term, they might suffer even more. But if you don't let go, if you don't decrease your involvement and your accommodation in OCD, it's just going to ratchet up more and more and more. It doesn't mean you're cold turkey, it's just, you don't just stop right away. You do it gradually, and you pick and choose which behaviors and what the obsessive thoughts are. And what you learn, of course, in ERP therapy is that your child can't control their thoughts, but they can control what they do about them. Yeah. And you use different strategies accordingly. But I think it's critical. And even to this day, I am Andrew and Ainsley's treatment partner.
Yeah.
They start each therapy session by themselves, and I come in near the end. Occasionally, I'm there through the whole thing. One of Andrew's biggest difficulties right now with OCD-related disorder is his lip picking and scab picking. It's the toughest nut for him to crack. And he's actually not even aware he's picking until he's in the midst of it most times, right? And it's, again, therapy, COMB, comprehensive behavioral intervention-based treatment, Charlie Mansueto, but it's based on ERP. It's a cognitive behavioral technique, but I had to learn it along with Andrew. ERP, I had to learn it along with Andrew. And you need refreshers, homework assignments every single time that we practice at home. By being his treatment partner, I know what the therapist said. I give my input. Before each session, Andrew and I both send the therapist our input. And I make sure, this is part of the partnership, Patrick, that his psychiatrist and his psychologist communicate with one another. We're all on the same team.
Key. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that integrated approach. So you've got to sometimes hit bottom before you go up. But if you're too scared and you continue feeding into the OCD, it's going to get worse.
Yeah. Going back to the physical side, if you were told from a physical point of view, you know, don't give your child this ingredient because it causes horrible reactions in them, many people would say, okay, I understand. But to not, when your child asks you the 12th time, can you just promise me that it'll be okay, to not answer that, fundamentally feels like a different thing. And yet in reality is not different in that kind of.
Yeah. And I don't think it's that you're silent.
Right.
You can say, and I've often said, Andrew, that's your OCD talking. Mm-hmm. But I still get caught from time to time. Andrew is a huge reassurance seeker. Are you okay? Are we okay, Mom? Are we okay, Mom? And the other day, without thinking, I inadvertently responded. And then he looked at me with a huge grin and pointed at me and said, gotcha. So, you do have to do that. But, with his just right OCD, another form that he has, his TV stand last year got dented. I drag him over, or he'll now drag me over to that TV stand, and we stare at it purposely.
Excellent. I'm
not going to replace it, although he got locked on it and asked me repeatedly for a new stand, because that would just fuel and heighten the OCD.
Mm-hmm. If you could, obviously, if wishes were fishes, we'd have a ton of fishes, wouldn't we? But this is kind of a two-parter, maybe even looking back, what do you wish you knew earlier in the journey? The standard questions people always ask, but that, or combining that with, there's other people who are starting this whole experience now. What would you tell them to start doing now? So that kind of combines what you wish you knew earlier to what would you tell someone? Yeah.
So I think if I answered the first part of the question first, what I wish I knew earlier, the first early on would have been trust my gut as a parent.
Gotcha. Okay.
That was the first lesson. But again, that overarching insight of partnerships has been absolutely key. And I still use it today. We parents know our kids best. And by working hand in hand with mental health care professionals and other professionals on the team, that's how we can best optimize our children's lives. It's that teamwork and that partnership. But the advice that I would have for someone starting out, many of the insights we've talked about today, not only trust your gut, embrace research, talk openly with your children, embrace medications and therapy as needed. I stress that because not everyone needs both, but for those that do, recalibrate, reset those expectations for your life. Volunteer and advocate if you can. There's so many. Be kind to your partner, be kind to yourself. But all these initiatives move forward gradually, and there are many bumps along the way. So I think there's several points that are important. One, validate not only your loved ones, your child's feelings, but your own feelings. It's okay to feel like garbage. Yeah. It's okay to wonder if you're ever going to climb out of this misery. Try to focus, though, on your child's successes, particularly when they're using strategies that they're learning in therapy. It really balances and provides balance against those challenges.
Love it.
Remind yourself not to enable the OCD, which I still have to do, as you just heard. Participate, if possible, in your child's therapy sessions. Now, Andrew's grown now, so I need his permission, as anyone does who has an adult child, to participate. And he's willingly given it. Mm-hmm. Just so key, so we can practice between sessions and be on the same page. Keep reading. Stay current. Of course, you have to take breathers from time to time. There's that law of diminishing returns, but there are always new findings and medications and therapy, and that's going to put you in the best position to advocate for your child. If you have the time, energy, and reserves, as I said, volunteer and advocate. And finally, focus on your self-care, including forgiving yourself for your mistakes and complimenting yourself.
I want to add a little to that piece at the end.
Please.
There are families who have children who have significant health issues and their marriages suffer because of it. And you and David have stayed together. How did you do that?
It's a great question. There's no question that David and I want to throttle each other from time to time. I mean, every marriage, right? But at our core, we lean on one another. We trust each other. We know that we're each trying our best. David's so much slower and less decisive than I am. It drives me nuts, as I said, but I know he's trying his best, even if it's not what I would do. And the key is to give each other the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. The one thing we never do about their mental health is argue in front of the children or disagree. Take that offside. Children have inbuilt antenna. They know when their parents aren't on the same page. And particularly, I think medications cause a lot of disagreements, where one parent may not believe in meds, may not believe their child needs it. It's understandably scared about their child turning into a zombie. So whether it's discipline, which we all face, therapy, diagnoses, medications, you want to give each other the benefit of the doubt and try to work toward a compromise together. Try to carve out satisfying lives as spouses away from the kids.
Great advice. Yeah. Yeah. It's just such a shame that there are times that, there can be the identified problem, right, in the family, and that can be the child, and couples forget to take care of each other then in that
Correct.
Entire experience. Because
now part of us taking care of each other is to take vacations separately, because we cannot take vacations together. One of us has to be here for the kids.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I get that. Yeah.
David goes golfing and skiing, and I go to bridge tournaments or, do whatever. It's really, go to a spa. It's really important, and that you take that time for yourself, for us. So we lead parallel lives in many ways.
And if you are together, probably the appreciation of a good staycation in your own town for the two of you, if you need like even a few hours, and it's got to be truncated, right? It might just be enjoying a couple of hours and knowing that, all right, these are our hours, right? Instead of days or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So every Wednesday night, David and I have a date night. Doesn't always work, but we aim for it.
I'm going to ask again, one other question on this, and wherever you want to go, but you're not going to be here forever, Jan.
Correct.
And that means planning for your children after you're gone. And this is a huge fear of families in these situations. How do you approach that? Do you talk to your children about that? What is your advice to people in that area?
Oh, this is something I shout out about all the time. When I said I was terrified about the future, I learned fairly quickly, and I'm thankful for that. Even though I had no idea what my children's capabilities and needs would be when they grew up, I started doing that research and preparing for the future so that I knew most of the options, not all of them, obviously, when the time came. Absolutely key. So in Andrew's case, because of the complexity of his challenges, and he does have cognitive and intellectual limitations, David and I, in 2009, became his legal guardians.
Okay.
Now, that's both for personal care and for finance, real estate. It's It's called different things in Canada probably
Sure.
than in the United States.
Mhm.
But now we're getting older. Andrew's grown. And what's going to happen when we're not here? So it took us about 18 months because neither of us, frankly, have any family members who are interested or willing to take on future roles. And you've got to have those open discussions with them now. So Ainsley agreed to be Andrew's future guardian on the personal care side, but she, with her learning disabilities, can't handle the financial side. And so we found an angel of a family friend who's agreed to take that on.
Okay.
And we've named them now co-legal guardians with us.
Mm-hmm.
So that if one of us can't handle it anymore, dies, whatever, there are always two of us. We always want three on both sides.
Okay.
That's just one case. For Ainsley, we've set up an informal circle of support with trusted friends in different parts of her life who can help her.
Wow.
That's just one example. Financial planning. Absolutely imperative to start it now, no matter how young your child is.
Yeah.
Be conservative. You can always change it as your child's capabilities and needs clarify. But it makes such a difference in having a more secure future, both for you and for your child.
Yeah. I don't think anyone talks about that enough.
I'm always shocked when I speak to groups of parents and caregivers of how many of them, and I understand it, they close their eyes and they blindly assume that their child's siblings will take over or someone else will, and they don't address it. If you don't address it, there can be real potential damage in the future, and your child could be left alone and needing help. You've got to address all these things. Face those fears, just as I said, like in ERP therapy, and take care of them.
Yeah. Thank you for being so open and honest about all of that. It is essential for families to hear these things, to have these discussions. I think a lot of people are probably even scared to talk about their own death and what it would mean for them, much less how that influences the rest of the family. But these are the tough things that people have to start facing because we don't know what's going to be out there in the future, what kind of finances are going to be there. We can't necessarily rely on everything that we've been used to. So it is going to take a lot of proactiveness on the part of each individual family to do these things, make these tough choices, set these things up. And I hope that allows you, when you're not here anymore and as you're on your last days, I don't want to sound morbid in this.
No, it's not.
But really that you could die with dignity and knowing that you've done everything that you can all the way up to the legacy is there too. Not just that I've done anything can, but now I'm gone and I don't know what the hell's going to happen, but I've done what I can and I've left the legacy also. It's so important.
Look, we all do our best, and that's what you've got to try to do, is do your best.
Yeah, awesome. Jan, any last words that you want to give anybody who's watching today before we wrap up?
Yes, I think there is one I'd like to say. Mm-hmm. We all have a choice in life. We can embrace it or be defeated by it. No matter how life is difficult at times, it's so important to embrace it. Remember that you're not alone. There are many communities of like-minded individuals, either with OCD or like me, parents and caregivers, waiting to embrace you, to guide you, to give you comfort and understanding. There are solutions, as overwhelming as the situation can seem. And that's the reason in my book, Hold On Tight, I chose Teddy Roosevelt's quote, "Believe you can and you're halfway there," as the epigraph to the book. Please persevere, have hope, and hold on tight.
Hold On Tight, a parent's journey raising children with mental illness. Jan, the author, thank you so much for being open and honest with us today, having this conversation. It doesn't happen enough, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it to make sure that we really do have families understand all of the complexities. And I think anyone getting the book would be able to read into that. And I also think it's a nice, kind of combination with, as you were talking about Alec, his book too, about what if you have someone with mental health issues in the family who is refusing treatment, right? And the flip side in that area. And so there's so much more look at this now, which I'm just thrilled about because these are essential topics for everybody.
Thank you, Patrick. Wonderful to be here.
Awesome. And thank all of you for joining us today. If you like the Get to Know OCD podcast and what we discussed today, subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel so you can watch more episodes, or you can get it wherever you subscribe to all of your favorite podcasts. And if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions like body-focused repetitive behaviors or hoarding or related things like trauma and tics and anxiety, depression, mood, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we have licensed therapists in your area ready to work with you, and we have a care team standing by to talk with you as soon as possible. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks for joining. Make it a good one.